Imagine a respected, powerful man who teaches about God during the day, but walks alone through the dark streets of Jerusalem at night. A man who has all the answers of religion, but carries questions that torture him inside. This is Nicodemus, the man who sought Jesus in secret and discovered a new path. His biblical story reveals something extraordinary about all of us. Because Nicodemus wasn't just a curious Pharisee, he was someone who had the courage to question everything he knew to find the truth. And what Jesus revealed to him that night changed not only his life, but defined one of the most profound teachings on spiritual transformation. Have you ever wondered what really happened in that secret meeting, and why such an influential man chose to hide in the shadows to seek answers? Get ready, because Nicodemus's journey will touch something deep in your heart. And in the end, I'll share with you the most impactful revelation about what we can learn from his transformation. The stars shone brightly over Jerusalem when a man emerged from his house, wrapping his cloak around himself. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a beggar. He was Nicodemus, one of Israel's most respected leaders. But that night, something was deeply troubling him. His sandals softly touched the stones of the deserted streets. Each step was calculated, discreet. Why would a man of his standing walk alone in the darkness? Why did he choose night to do something he could have done during the day? The truth is, Nicodemus carried a heavy heart. For years, he taught the sacred law, knew the scriptures deeply, and guided multitudes in the ways of God. But lately, something inside him cried out that something was missing, a spiritual thirst that formal religion could not quench. He had heard of Jesus of Nazareth, this young teacher who spoke with an authority unlike anything he had ever known, whose miracles were undeniable, but whose words challenged everything Nicodemus had ever learned about God. And that night, he finally found the courage to seek him out. But why hide it? What could an encounter with Jesus reveal that would forever change this powerful man's life? The Jerusalem night breeze carried the scent of incense from the temple sacrifices. Nicodemus paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and adjusted his cloak. His eyes reflected decades of study, responsibility, and a life dedicated to serving God. But they also revealed a restlessness that grew with each passing day. This was no ordinary man. Nicodemus was a Pharisee, a member of the Sanhedrin, Israel's supreme religious council. Imagine the responsibility. He was among the 71 most influential men in the nation, those who decided matters of faith, law, and justice for the entire Jewish people. His word carried weight. His opinion shaped destinies. During the day, crowds sought him out. "Master Nicodemus, how should we interpret this passage? Teacher, what is God's will in this situation?" He answered confidently, quoting the sacred scriptures and explaining ancient traditions. He was known as Teacher in Israel, a title few achieved. But here was the paradox of his life. The more he taught about God, the more he felt something eluding him. It was as if he knew all the words to a song but had never heard the melody. His faith was becoming mechanical, and his heart yearned for something real, something alive. How can a man who teaches about God feel so distant from him? And what does this reveal about our own spiritual journey? Nicodemus continued his walk through the silent streets, but within him there was a true turmoil. Each step echoed the questions that had tormented him for months. Is everything I teach enough? Do I truly know God, or just notions about him? Nicodemus's problem wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was a lack of spiritual life. He knew every ritual, every law, every tradition. He could recite the Psalms from memory, explain the prophets, interpret the symbols of the temple, but his soul was as dry as the Judean desert. Worse still, he saw in people's eyes the same spiritual thirst he felt. When he preached in the synagogue, he realized that his words, though correct, didn't touch their hearts. It was like offering stagnant water to those in need of a living spring. Religion had become a burden, not a liberation. And then Jesus appeared. This young man from Nazareth spoke of God as if he knew him personally. He healed with a word, forgave sins, and transformed lives with a simplicity that disconcerted even the most learned. The miracles were evident, but something else disturbed Nicodemus. Jesus radiated the life he so desperately sought. Would Nicodemus have the courage to admit that despite all his knowledge, he was still a thirsty man? And you, have you ever felt that emptiness that formal religion can't fill? There he was, Jesus, sitting beneath the soft glow of a lamp, as if he had already known Nicodemus would come. There was no pomp, no ceremony, just two men about to have one of the most important conversations in human history. Nicodemus's heart raced. "Teacher, we know you are a teacher, come from God, because no one can do these signs you do unless God is with him." The words came out of his mouth, but they revealed much more than he intended. Nicodemus didn't come just with curiosity, he came with recognition. He knew he was in the presence of someone special. Jesus' answer was like a bolt of lightning in a dark night. "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." That was it. In one sentence, Jesus shattered the entire religious structure Nicodemus knew. He didn't talk about rituals, sacrifices, or knowledge. He spoke of something completely new. And here, if this story is touching your heart as it touched Nicodemus's, leave a sign that you liked it and subscribe to follow more stories that can transform your spiritual life. What did Jesus mean by being born again? For Nicodemus, who based everything on lineage, tradition, and works, this idea was revolutionary. It was as if Jesus was saying, everything you've built up to this point isn't enough. You need to start over, but this time, completely differently. How would a 60-year-old respected and established man react to such a radical proposal? And you, are you prepared to hear that you might need to be born again? How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into the womb and be born? Nicodemus's question reveals his confusion, but also his honesty. He didn't pretend to understand. He didn't smile diplomatically. He expressed his genuine doubt. Jesus, with infinite patience, explained, "That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." He was speaking of two completely different types of birth. The first, physical, which we all experience. The second, spiritual, which few understand. For Nicodemus, who lived surrounded by purification rituals, this idea was disconcerting. Jesus was saying that no matter how many times he purified himself ritually, no matter how many sacrifices he offered, he needed a transformation that came from the inside out, not the outside in. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Jesus used the wind as a metaphor. You can't control the wind, but you can feel its effects. The new spiritual birth is like that, mysterious, powerful, transformative. At that moment, Nicodemus was being confronted with the greatest truth of his life, that religious knowledge without inner transformation is like a tree without fruit, beautiful in appearance, but empty of purpose. How can this be? Nicodemus's question echoed in the night, heavy with decades of religious conditioning. His rational mind struggled with a spiritual truth that challenged everything he had ever learned. It was the conflict between human wisdom and divine revelation. Jesus responded with a mixture of correction and compassion. "You are the teacher of Israel, and you do not know these things?" It wasn't humiliation. It was an invitation to humility. Jesus was showing that true knowledge of God goes beyond formal education, beyond titles, beyond traditions. Nicodemus's problem was common to many religious leaders. He had become a prisoner of his own knowledge, like a man who had studied maps all his life but never taken a real journey. He knew the route theoretically, but had never experienced it in practice. Jesus continued to reveal truths that made Nicodemus's heart race. No one has ascended into heaven except the one who came down from heaven, the Son of Man. He was subtly but powerfully declaring his divine identity. This was not just another teacher. This was someone who had come from heaven itself. Imagine the impact of these words on Nicodemus's mind. Would he have enough faith to accept that his nighttime search had led him to the very Son of God? Nicodemus emerged from that encounter transformed, but not in the way we might expect. There was no dramatic conversion, no immediate public declaration. Instead, something more subtle and profound began to happen. A seed was planted in his heart. In the following days, Nicodemus continued his normal activities. He taught in the synagogue, attended Sanhedrin meetings, and fulfilled his religious duties. But now there was a difference. Jesus' words echoed constantly in his mind. You must be born again. You must be born again. He became what we might call a secret disciple. He watched Jesus from afar, listened to his teachings when possible, but avoided public association. This wasn't simple cowardice, it was strategic prudence. Nicodemus knew that a premature declaration could end his influence and consequently his ability to protect Jesus when needed. His faith grew in silence, like a plant sprouting in the darkness before reaching the light. He began to question traditions he had previously accepted without thinking, to see God more personally and less institutionally. His encounter with Jesus had sown a silent revolution in his heart. Sometimes the most profound transformations happen away from the spotlight. Nicodemus teaches us that not every conversion needs to be loud to be genuine. The first public demonstration of Nicodemus's inner transformation occurred during a tense meeting of the Sanhedrin. The religious leaders were furious with Jesus and planned to arrest him. The atmosphere was charged with hatred and fear. It was the perfect moment for Nicodemus to remain silent. But something had changed in him. The Gospel of John records his courageous words. Does our law judge a man without first hearing him and knowing what he does? It was a subtle but real defense. Nicodemus was using his knowledge of the law to protect Jesus. The reaction was immediate and hostile. Are you also from Galilee? Search and see that no prophet arises from Galilee. Nicodemus's colleagues attacked him with sarcasm and contempt. But he had crossed a line. For the first time, he risked his reputation to defend Jesus. This moment reveals something profound about the process of transformation. It rarely happens all at once. It's like dawn, first a soft light on the horizon, then the sky gradually brightens until finally the sun appears in all its glory. Nicodemus's faith was dawning. How many of us are afraid to take the first public step in our faith? Nicodemus shows us that courage is a muscle that strengthens with practice. The cross changed everything. When Jesus was crucified, many disciples fled. Peter denied knowing him. The apostles went into hiding. But two unlikely men approached them, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. The secret disciple finally emerged from the shadows. The Gospel of John tells us that Nicodemus, who had previously come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. 100 pounds. It was an extravagant amount, fit for a king's burial. Nicodemus didn't just show up, he showed up with royal generosity. Imagine the scene. Two respected men, members of the Sanhedrin, carefully removing Jesus' body from the cross, wrapping it in fine linen with precious spices, and placing it in a new tomb. It was an act of love, courage, and public faith. The man who once sought Jesus in the darkness now served him in the light of day. The man who had been afraid to be seen with the living Jesus was now unafraid to be seen caring for the dead Jesus. The transformation was complete. Sometimes our greatest acts of faith happen when circumstances seem most desperate. Nicodemus teaches us that true courage manifests itself when we need it most. Nicodemus's story doesn't end with Jesus' burial. Early Christian traditions suggest that he fully embraced faith, became an active preacher of the gospel, and faced persecution for his conviction. The man who began as a secret seeker ended as a courageous witness. But what is Nicodemus's true legacy for us today? First, he teaches us that it's never too late to begin a genuine spiritual journey. At 60, with an established career and a reputation to protect, He had the courage to question everything and seek the truth. Second, Nicodemus shows us that real transformation takes time. He wasn't converted instantly. It was a gradual but genuine process. His faith grew like a tree, first the invisible roots, then the subtle growth, finally the evident fruits. Third, he proves that God can use anyone, regardless of their social status or religious background. Nicodemus came with prejudices, doubts, and fears, but Jesus received him with patience and love. The same Jesus who transformed a Pharisee can transform any open heart. Ultimately, Nicodemus symbolizes all of us who seek something deeper than superficial religion. He represents our thirst for spiritual authenticity, our need for a real encounter with God, our journey from knowledge of God to relationship with God. His story invites us to ask the same question Jesus asked him: "Are you ready to be born again?" Nicodemus's journey is the journey of each of us. We all begin with questions, doubts, and sincere searches for meaning. We all face the challenge of choosing between the comfort of the familiar and the adventure of a new spiritual birth. Nicodemus's encounter with Jesus that night in Jerusalem teaches us that God honors every sincere heart that seeks him. No matter your age, social status, religious background, or fears, Jesus is ready to meet you, just as he met Nicodemus. The question remains, will you have the courage of Nicodemus? The courage to question what needs to be questioned, to seek what needs to be sought, to transform yourself when transformation is necessary. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who is also seeking spiritual answers. Leave a comment about what aspect of Nicodemus's journey impacted you most. Subscribe to follow more life-changing stories. And remember the promise I made at the beginning. Nicodemus teaches us that the new birth is not just a theological theory. It is a practical reality available to every heart that genuinely seeks God. As Jesus told him and tells you today, you must be born again. May God bless your journey of faith. Until the next story.